everyone. Welcome to this space. We're here at Green College. This is a space for graduate students, postdoctoral researchers, and visiting researchers to live, to eat, and to learn. And it's a space for the broader UBC community to learn as well. And so, as always, we'd like to begin with a reminder that Green College and UBC is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of Musqueam people. And to keep that in mind. So we're very grateful to have Early Music Vancouver here with us again. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Julia Halbert, who will kick off today's event. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you. So my name is Julia Halbert, and I work for EMV as the Executive Assistant and Project Manager, and we're thrilled to be here today with you all. We've been a vital contributor of Vancouver's cultural scene for over 55 years, 55 years this summer, which is really exciting. We present over 40 live events each year featuring wonderful artists from all over the globe. And our relationship with Green College dates back to 1993 and has been a wonderful place for us to stimulate a cultural dialogue between our local community and the artists and music that we make. So we're really grateful for this relationship and opportunity. And without further ado, I'm very excited to welcome Vincent Galland for his first lecture and recital here at Green College. And without further ado...
Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vincent. I'm very happy and feel very privileged to have the opportunity to speak in front of you today, give this lecture, and obviously give this little recital right after. I want to start thanking the UBC staff for hosting us, obviously, tonight, and all the EMV team members, Jonathan, Julian, Nathan, Susie. We've been going through quite a lot today to bring you this beautiful instrument, and it always takes quite a lot to bring out all the best Baroque music has to offer to an audience, so just recognizing this little bit here. Obviously, the topic I wanted to discuss today is pretty dear to my heart because it's everything that I think about when I play, when I prepare some music, and in general, the reason why I spend some time on the keyboard and the harpsichord. And so we're going to go a little bit beyond technique and repertoire, some things that are quite often talked about in academic circles, and talk about something that's less talked about. From my own point of view, obviously, there's a lot of them out there, and so let's get started. So things that I will talk about tonight, they can be applied to any style of music, first of all, any sort of art form, even sports. We're going to talk about a few concepts that I think are key to not only finding inspiration, but also conveying in an efficient way. And obviously, I'll talk about the performance point of view tonight. There's an audience, obviously, you're sitting on the other side, but the performer is, it's quite easy to remind everybody, but it's not just a machine who's learned years of technique and music and just delivers it. It's a human, and this is an unforgiving machine that sometimes doesn't always work, and so there's a lot of reaction, and so the importance of the direct communication style, touch and sound with this instrument is quite profound, and so I just want to kind of set the context here. Second of all, doing a bit of research on this topic as well. It's quite hard to not use too much words when talking about that topic, something that's a bit more intangible, something that has to do with emotions. Trying not to be too formal, but still, I think it's an important topic to discuss with the audience because it just almost never gets talked about. Like really what motivates the musician to sit and play his heart out, what inspires him, and give the audience a little bit something different than just historical facts or technical, I would say, information. Jean Rondeau, who's a prominent artist out of France, has a funny relationship with that sort of concept. And a few interviews that I watched of them, On the other hand, he doesn't want to use too much words and hopes that the audience doesn't say too much after the audience. But when he tries to actually put words into what he's trying to convey, it's quite philosophical. He's quite smart and eloquent about the way he says things, but we can sense quite quickly that it's a never-ending explanation. Tonight I'll try to make it very concise and to the point, again, based on my point of view. And we'll get a Q&A, obviously, later. This topic has a range of tangential topics and questions. And some of the questions that I brought to my own mind was, are we the vessel for a composer? Or should we be? Or is the music the vessel for our own self-expression? There are two, maybe several, three main trains of thoughts that people usually adhere to when going to a concert. I want to hear Chopin or Bach. I don't really care so much about the composer. I'm more the school of in-between. It depends. But Seymour Bernstein, who's a prominent piano master, actually had this nice little quote here. When I hear Bach, I'm not aware that I'm listening to Bach. His Bach, speaking of, I'm listening to Glenn Gould's neurotic interpretation of it. So just something to think about, some food for thoughts as we delve into that topic. In summary, here are the two things that I want to focus on today. Again, I will not talk about technique, theory, repertoire, even historically informed performance, which is the basis of my education in Baroque music. I really want to talk about the last piece of it, the expression, the values, the storytelling. Professors definitely touch upon this in general, but it seems less formal, it seems less complete. Not officially part of any curriculum, but somehow, to me, it's always been the most important thing. It connects me to my professors and the teaching in deeper ways than any of the other points. So that's why I want to spend a bit of time on those two things today. So, to go straight to it, to me, here are some of the three components in finding inspiration and instilling it into a sound. Today, obviously, we're talking about Baroque music and the harpsichord. Acknowledging something that's a little bit vague and intangible, but is really true, is time traveling. Quite obvious with playing period music. Oh, I'm playing 200, 300-year-old music. But it's actually very powerful. Because when you go to Versailles or when you go to other places that inspire you, and you have that power through the music to actually go there for a few minutes of time, be as close as possible to the composer. And when you deeply meditate about this, it brings you to a place that's not here. It's a different point in time, somewhere else. And that's something to acknowledge. And that's maybe the closest thing that's being taught through, again, repertoire, techniques, and historical documents to time traveling. But I think as a performer, it's quite neat sometimes to project yourself in the reality of those times. And imagine being not just a composer, but even someone playing at the court of Louis, whichever number it could be, or Henry's, or Louis Philippe. And play in front of that audience for the first time. Like, how cool would that be? And so, imagining all of this, I think, brings a little bit more of a strength element to a performer's interpretation, potentially. The other time travel piece is one's own life, my own life, for example. Until I actually put down some words on paper for this presentation, I haven't realized that something that is very easy to do, but I can travel back to my own life when I was a kid learning one of those pieces. And I can see myself being my own teacher. I'm sitting there right next to me, like, I should play this way. Maybe change the phrasing a little bit. Why? Because over time, my interpretation, my tastes, my technique even changes. I believe for the better, thankfully. But again, it's quite a neat thing to be your own teacher, seeing yourself, like your memories, and going back there for a little time and nurture yourself this way. So again, time travel. Number 2, contemplation abilities. So that's talked quite a bit in different articles and other literature. It's quite important to go outside of the box, walk in the mountains, the woods, see some different arts. Basically have a life as filled with expression as possible. Doesn't have to be always positive. But when you feel close to those contemplation, those visions, those visualization, it's easier to then recognize them through a scored music. You hear a note, you hear a passage, and for whatever reason, can't explain it yet, reminds you of a place, a time, a person. Whether it's right now or in the past or maybe even in the future. And so contemplation is extremely valuable. And to give you an example of what happens as a performer, oftentimes I just have flashes of a random vision that I've had during a hike somewhere in a foggy forest. It's a few seconds, but it's very powerful. And it always relates to maybe a point of tension in the music, or even again the reaction of the sound through the room or the instrument, because that changes too. But the ability to contemplate either beauty or different forms of appeal is important, and then conveying this through the performance. And lastly, and it's related to this, once you've, I guess, acknowledged and owned those first 2 points, is you got to try to replicate them internally and execute on that. And then you help yourself, obviously, with all the technique, repertoires, performance abilities you have. But you use those 3 to really harness as much as you can and instill it in your playing. So, a bit more concrete ways to try to actually do that. Obviously, there's a mental preparation going into that. It goes beyond practicing. I'm talking about mental preparation going into a concert, going into a performance of any kind. Again, it goes back to sports, right? Meditation, visualization, projecting yourself, accomplishing, finishing a piece. So that's very important. Number 2, the live performance itself. Breathing methods. We often talk about breathing in when we study, like take a breath to start a new phrase or something, or to pause. But I've actually thought we never really hear so much about exhaling. Exhaling to me is very important because it's more the relaxing bit. Breathing can be actually quite tense. You're like, oh, don't forget to breathe. Or, oh, there's this phrase coming, I gotta breathe. But then you don't exhale and you end up not actually breathing. You get tensed, you get a little red. So exhaling, those different methods, and setting the stage. You'll see me when I play, I'll try to take a little bit of a time to really think about what I'm about to embark on. I don't really think that way, but there's a train of thought that music, sound is something that's always flowing, and you're just trying to write it and catch it. There's some truth to that in the sense that when you're about to hit that note, there's no turning back, right? You're about to hit it, and you're trying to find the internal best moment to do that when you're at peace with yourself. Obviously, if you're rushed, if your thoughts are a little over the place, you might go through it, but it'll be a struggle. Last but not least, something that I'm actually quite keen on developing a bit more is anything non-musical related at all. We're talking here about visual effects, informational artifacts. So you might have seen in the program today that I've included some notes that are, I would say, expressing to the best of my ability what I think a piece is about to me. And it can change. And I think it just gives you an example of all the ways that you can think about a piece of music. So Of course, it can be something more specific about the program, but basically doing the effort, going the extra mile to provide the audience with something tangible, to prepare them what they're about to witness. Because one of my goals in just talking to you about the subject today is really to demystify a little bit of the classical music scene, little, right? Not just going to a concert, oh, we're going to see the Goldbergs, oh, it's this guy, George Steyer maybe, and we're just going to sit here and listen. And of course, oh, it's Bach, it's Goldberg, like, not really sure what it is, but it must be good. So providing something a bit more about the intent of the artist. What is he actually trying to do for his performance? Is it just to replicate it to his best ability? What's the actual goal? So all those non-musical related efforts to me are quite key, again. We're going to move to one of the last parts of the lecture. And it goes back again to the points, I'm just going to show them again, of time travel, contemplation, visualization. Those are things you can do, I guess, yourself, on your own, with your own thoughts. But the truth of the matter is, from experience, you definitely need a kicker. You need something that happens to you to generate those thoughts. They can be voluntary or involuntary. So that last phase is more the voluntary part. It's what you can do to instill inspiration. So I'd like to talk about this movie and this book. I don't know if you've heard of it. But basically going through literature, film, photography, other forms of visual and auditory arts is also very important. So the specific case about this movie done in the 1990s, quite instrumental in the Baroque, for the Baroque music, because it kind of like the 70s and 80s with, I'd say 80s with Scott Ross, kind of rekindled again the flame for Baroque music appreciation, especially through the viola da gamba, but the lute as well, harpsichord. Very important piece of work. So it's a book, same year, but it's been rewritten for the film and music scores by Jordi Savall, who's a renowned gambist. It's the story of a visual and auditory meditation on musicianship, mourning, serenity, and passion, and explores the truth around the nature of music and musicianship. There's quite a lot going on in that movie in terms of art representation, in terms of philosophy. I think, I don't know in English how it's said, but jansenism, a type of austere Christianism, I believe, back in the 17th century, is portrayed in here. But the story itself portrays the thoughts of Saint Colombe and its tentative student, Marin Marais, who attempts to learn the true essence of music through his guidance, or lack thereof guidance. Very difficult in this movie. You'll see Marin Marais has a hard time until the very end to reach even anything out of the master. And so, in any case, when I feel out of inspiration, when I feel I need to delve a little bit deeper than just my own train of thoughts, I turn to some movies, art, literature that inspire me. And so this one is quite important. And I'm going to read through a few passages to try to illustrate also what I mean in terms of the truth for musicianship that's illustrated in a movie. I'll put up a few quotes on the screen, but I'll read the longer passages here that I translated to French movie, incidentally. Quick question, has anybody seen this movie before? One person over there. All right. 15 more to go or something. But I highly advise it for anyone who loves, let's say, music, classical music, yes, Baroque music in particular. It's quite an experience. It's a highly acclaimed movie, the book itself as well. I had about 7 months of preparation for my Oberlin final recital, and I think I spent 3 months watching this on me weekly, I think, until my fingers were drained from too much practicing. But it helped me go through a 2-hour recital with no interruption in my own little world. I think it supported, again, the sustained inspiration you need throughout the concert. I think, obviously, you don't need to spend months watching a movie every time, but the point is that looking elsewhere to get inspiration is quite important. So I'll read a few passages. So at some point, and by the way, this movie is inspired by historical facts. Not all the truth, but it's heavily inspired by historical facts. So Monsieur de Saint-Colomb was ordered to become musician at the king's court, but he refused, and in a rage finally told Abbé Mathieu that your palace is smaller than a hut and your audience is less than a person. And so obviously at first the king was insulted, but he actually liked that answer. He respected that answer a lot. The only thing he asked his court is to leave Mr. Saint-Colomb alone and never attend his concerts anymore. He was never invited back, obviously, to the court. But what this quote means to me, basically, is you don't really need anybody to play music or to feel something about music. You play, obviously, for an audience. In our world, it's a human audience. It's us, it's people. It's a communication language. But to feel music, technically, you don't need to perform at the top of the pinnacle of your art. You're just playing a hut, which is what he's done most of his life. And you can play also for a very important person. And it so happened that the person he might be referring to in that film is his deceased wife, who he sees as a ghost throughout his life. And you might have noticed that this scene is basically this one. It's a painting by Beaujean. And they made quite a lot of references in the movie to this art form. This is Marin Marais young, but here's Guillaume Depardieu, so Depardieu's son, acting. Marin Marais visited Monsieur Saint-Colomb in hopes to be his student. And he performed for him in front of his daughters as well. And after playing beautifully, Mr. Saint-Colomb said, "I don't think I'm going to admit you as one of my pupils. You make music, sir, but you're not a musician." As the young Marin Marais returned to Monsieur Saint-Colomb 1 month following his audition, Monsieur de Saint-Colomb would finally admit Marin Marais among his other students, and then tell him this: "Sir, you didn't play badly. You know the body position. Your playing is not lacking in feeling. Your bow is light and bouncy. Your left hand leaps like a squirrel and slithers like an eel over the strings. Your ornaments are ingenious, sometimes charming, but I haven't heard any music." So again, going back to my point around technique, he's quite a rough man. Technique, repertoire, historical form performances, obviously are tools to be able to play this thing or another thing. But is it enough? So he alludes to this, and throughout the movie or the life now, I will try to pursue what the master is really talking about. He continues and says, you can help people dance. You can accompany actors singing on stage. What you will write will please, but never frighten. You'll learn a living. You'll live surrounded by music, but you won't be a musician. Do you have a heart to feel? Do you have any idea what sounds can be used for when it's no longer a question of dancing or delighting the king's ears? However, your broken heart moved me. I keep you for your pain, not for your art. Again, goes back to maybe this quote as well. And the last powerful one towards the end. Years later, Marin Marais returns and sneaks in behind Saint Colombe's hut at night, trying to steal some ornaments, some composition, but it so happened that Mr. Saint Colombe never played for years because his daughter died some years ago, and out of sorrow, he never played again. And one night, he finally takes up his viola and starts playing. And he's trying to get into the hut, and Mr. Saint Colombe says, "What are you looking for, sir, in music?" "I'm looking for regrets and tears." He lets him in. They have a discussion again about musicianship after all these years. And they have quite a funny interaction where any attempt by Marin to explain it finally would always result into a no from Saint Colombe. And so it goes. Saint Colombe would say, "Sir, music is simply there to speak of what words cannot speak of. In this sense, it's not entirely human. You discovered that it's not for the king? Well, I discovered it was for God. But you're wrong, because God speaks. It's for the ear, for gold, glory, silence, the rival musicians, love, love's regrets, abandonment. No. And then after a pause where he's basically quitting, after all this time, takes one more thought and goes as this. That music is a little watering hole for those deserted by language, for the shadow of children, to soften the color's hammer blows, for the states that precede childhood, when we were without breath and without light." And only after this, he gets a smile from Mr. Saint Colombe and accepts to play with him and share his compositions. But this last quote is kind of the essence of the movie and the book as well. It talks a little bit about trauma in there. So for the states, for the softened cobbler's hammer blows, for the shadow of children. So a lot of intangible things, but things that are very, again, meaningful when you're in a state of grief, of sadness, of longing for someone or something that's gone. And only music can help you express it and go through it. So I wanted to end on that note, to add a little bit of another layer to the things that I've talked about today, that are a bit more technical, a bit more to the point. It's still acknowledged that there's a lot of unknown, but somehow we get to express ourselves in the music and share that together. A bit of sources from if people are interested, and that's it for me. One of the exercises I love to do is to transcribe gamba music to harpsichord. This one is already done for me because it's for Corey, the son, who transcribed his father's music without his permission. And so I just love gamba music on the harpsichord. Not everything is always right for it, but this one, La Silva, part of the fifth suite by Corey, it's quite nice. And I'll have to bring back again to the movie we talked about at the lecture.